The greatest joy I tend to have now is to see the South African government is standing up for its citizens herself and for other African countries. You see, the government of the United States of America, led by Donald Trump, came forth some few weeks back to say every aid, medical aid to South Africa and other African countries and some other countries to be stopped forthwith. More searchlight was on South Africa. And the government of the United States of America actually went further to say every financial aid to South Africa should be stopped forthwith. And I want us to understand a few things here. Why is it that Donald Trump is doing what he's doing? And what it is the South African government is doing currently? Number one, Donald Trump is trying to say that the decisions and the policy that have been taken by South Africa, which happen to be a sovereign country, is unjust and unfair to the minority white in South Africa. And I began asking myself this question: what it is that Donald Trump meant by saying that the minority whites in South Africa? Do you know the pains and anguish South Africa have actually endured in their own land by set of people? I wouldn't want to go into the nitty-gritty of all of this. Probably I'm going to make a special video with regards to that. But for now, there was a time, I remember vividly in the early 90s, when Nigerian musicians and our government were singing that apartheid should be stopped in South Africa. The way South Africans were humiliated by the whites, even in their own very land, their land were taken from them. In South Africa as at then, over 90% of the land owned by the indigenous South Africa were stripped off from them. Only 7% of the lands were given back to South Africans. So a lot of lands as we speak now is in South Africa unused. So when South African government decided, by a move that was pushed vehemently by Julius Malema, that this land should be taken away from the white, but the government went further to put a caveat that we are not going to take just any land, but we are going to take the unused land, which has not been put into productive use, and this land will be given back to our people. But Donald Trump wants to control South Africa, which is not possible. And it's not possible. Donald Trump understands that South Africa is one of the countries living with the highest number of people living with HIV and AIDS, that by not giving them AIDS, medical aid, it might go a long way in affecting them. A lot of South Africans might even be deleted based on the fact that the retroviral drugs they used to get to keep them alive might not be there. And that is why I kept saying it proud before now, that the time has come for Africans to begin to work in synergy. The time has come for African government to begin to work in unison, because we depend on the West for aids and grants. That is why South Africa and even other Africa are in the mess in which they are currently. The issue of Boko Haram in Nigeria, the issue of Al-Shabaab, is the product of even the United States of America, as alleged by Pierce, one of the Congress members in America, that most of the aids and grants given to Africa, they are not just aids and grants. These are ammunitions given to terrorist groups to foment troubles and ensure that the lives of people in those countries are not just the way they should be. But the South African government decided that mineral resources which they used to sell to Americans will not be sold to them again, and other African countries should take a cue with regards to that. I do not feel that Trump has the moral justification to begin to cut off financial assistance to South Africa based on a singular hearsay without listening to the other side of the story. We know allegedly that this narrative pushed by Elon Musk, because South Africa has been this one country who is opposing Israel with regards to its occupation in the West Bank. That is why Trump administration is acting upon what Elon Musk is telling them. The issue here is not just about South Africans taking what rightly belongs to them back, but the issue here is, why will the government of the United States of America be putting our nose in an affair that is not a problem? Just a simple illustration. Someone came to your house. At a point in time, it seized your entire compound and makes you a slave in your own home. And their children are aware of this. The children grow up to become mature men and women who have the ability to fight for themselves. And when they decide to fight to get back their parents' property, you are telling them that what they are doing is not correct. I think Donald Trump needs to examine his decisions and policy. He should face America and leave South Africa and other African countries alone. I do not blame the West for all the shenanigans. The problem here is because the leaders we've got in Africa have been dependent upon the West. Not because we do not have the resources to make our continent one of the best in the world, but because we've got leaders who do not think outside the box. How many times do you see that Donald Trump will say, oh, what is happening in Somalia? Let's see how we are going to help them in Somalia. Each time they go to Somalia is to give them arm and ammunition. They are not going there to solve problems. They are going there to cause more crisis. What happened in Afghanistan? At the end of the day, what did the American government achieve in Afghanistan? There is nothing. So the medical aids and grants they are giving to South Africa and other African countries, they are all useless as far as I'm concerned. Africa as a continent is far richer than Europe if we can manage our resources the way we should. The best bet on how to go about this, Africa must learn to pull out from every international organization. Let Africa maintain their organization. We have our African Bank, we have our African Economic Summit, our African Court. Everything we do in Africa, in our continent, represent Africa as a continent. A European can bring his passport and go through all the countries in Africa free of charge without being harassed. But when a man from Ghana wants to go around African country just for an excursion, he's going to meet a lot of restriction because he's a black man like you. The time has come where the African continent and African people, they begin to think and know that we have been used in the past. Technically, we are still being colonized by the West. The World Bank, once they give an African loan, the interest rate is different from when an European also is given a loan. Where Africa will pay 70%, Europe will pay not less than 5%. Look at the dichotomy. But African leaders do not think we can put our resources together and begin to do what is just and fair for the African continent. In terms of medicine, we are good. But the problem here, the West will come in to tell us that whatever drug we produce is not of international standard. World Health Organization is not approving it. Let's have African Health Organization. Let's forget about World Health Organization. Let's begin to have our own. Let us live in our own continent and let them live in their own continent. We are bigger than them in every regard. But the problem here, most of our African leaders have become a puppet to them. For example, look at what is happening in Cameroon. As old as the president is in Cameroon, he's still paying obeisance and allegiance. He's still paying allegiance to that small boy in France. What kind of, it's an aberration. It's an aberration. So what South Africa has done, or what South Africa is doing now, other African countries should take a cue from that. In fact, in my opinion, let every African country begin to reject every foreign aids and grant from any European countries. If need be, let us close down every institution they have in Africa. They are the ones that are causing mayhem the most in Africa. Africa has done this right. We must all come together and support them to ensure that South Africa is not put to shame. Guys, I'm going to see you soon. I remain the Eagle's eyes.